I think that the thesis by Ronald Chipaike, Dr. Ronald Chipaike, makes a lot of sense to me now. Ronald Chipaike talks about the militarization of the scramble for African resources. I'm Maurice Odhiambo, the African teacher. The reality of what is going on in the Sahel, particularly after the countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, and so on, kicked out the French and their military bases. It's quite telling in terms of what is coming ahead. And it doesn't look good for Africa, for Africans, for African states, for African leaders, for the African Union. This thing does not look good at all. Now, first of all, remember that a lot of these terrorists, so-called terrorist groups, can actually be traced back to the big powers and the intelligence services. A lot of them, whether in the Arab world, whether in Africa, wherever, they can be traced back to the interests of the big powers and the activities of the intelligence agencies, because these are usually set up as a strategy to destabilize regions. Now, if you look at what has happened since the death of Muammar Gaddafi, of course, the rich countries, the big powers have always used force. Capitalism cannot survive without force, without weapons of mass destruction. That has been historically proven. Capitalism cannot survive, I think I should say that once more, without the use of force, without military, without weapons of mass destruction, without destabilizing entire regions. So the buildup that we are seeing in the Sahel is exactly because of that. First of all, it's to counter those states that have opted to free themselves of some of these foreign military bases. But secondly, and more importantly, more profoundly, is to continue the militarization of the scramble for African resources. That is Chipaike's thesis. Read that paper, because he wrote it after the assassination by NATO of Muammar Gaddafi. He said, this is the first indication of the militarization. Perhaps he should have said the complete militarization, because militarization has always been a strategy in terms of capturing resources from the African continent. If you go back to a DRC, if you come to Sudan now and so on, that has been the history. Capitalism cannot survive without military, without destabilization, and so on and so forth. So we now have to be very careful. I've been talking about the Nigerian situation for some time now, and the fact that religious persecution is being used now to infiltrate that country, and many Nigerians don't seem to be to understand really what is going on, why all of a sudden there is all this noise about Muslims being killed by Boko Haram. Boko Haram is killing everybody. It doesn't choose which tribe you belong to. It's killing everybody. It's killing Christians, Muslims, non-religious fellows like us. If you find yourself there, you'll be killed. Because it is an operation. Boko Haram is an operation that is acting in that part of the continent to destabilize the continent, to destabilize Nigeria. And you know, Nigeria is an economic giant on the continent. So once you destabilize Nigeria, you can do a lot of harm to that region, but also across the African continent. So African people must not only be very watchful of what is happening, they must also be very careful of which narratives they choose to believe. Going forward, this is going to be a real dangerous situation for Africans in general. The African Union, unfortunately, is on its deathbed if it did not die many years ago. So it might not be able to save this situation. Now, there is the use of so-called terrorist groups as a strategy. And then, of course, they will be backed up by the military bases in Djibouti and elsewhere. So the stage is set for a full militarization of the scramble for African resources. Just go back and read Ronald Chipaike on the situation after Gaddafi's assassination by the NATO. We must really understand what is going on in the continent and what forces are pushing whatever it is that is happening. Otherwise, we will wake up one day and our countries will be gone, our resources will be gone, and the dream of uniting Africa, securing Africa, will be forgotten.